Hey y'all, how you doing? Welcome to our first installment of Technical Talk. This is the RPM World Headquarters, the engineering department here of RPM Worldwide Motorsports. This is where it gets done. We got the telephone that we make all the calls on. Of course, we got another telephone here too, and of course the computer here. We can see we're downloading some more Nelson Ledges videos. That one there is processing at this time. 13 minutes and some odd seconds, I think that video is. And yet it takes 2 hours to upload. Ridiculous. It used to be a lot faster than that. But I wanted to talk to you about the spark plug issue we had yesterday at Nelson. This is the BR10 EV NGK. It says it's gold palladium. I'm going to guess and say this is like a 695 or 895 spark plug, maybe. I don't know. Maybe anyone knows for sure, leave it in the comments below. And this is the plug that we generally run, the BR10 same heat range EIX, which is iridium. They're both fine wire spark plugs. As you can see, this one's been run, it's been used, and this is the one that caused us the trouble yesterday at Nelson. They're both fine wire plugs. Reach is the same. The metal build is the same. The insulator looks slightly different. Looks like this one's a little shorter actually, and might even be a little narrower, a little skinnier. I never noticed that before. And this one has the removable nib on the top, which means cheap. That's a mark of the cheap one, and this is the solid bit. So we showed up at Nelson with a used plug in the engine. Obviously got a bunch of them. They don't go bad when we change them. We usually change them because we'll want a fresh read on a spark plugs, on a tune. So we don't take them out and change them because they're bad. We take them out and change them because they're not clean. So we changed the spark plug, and we put a brand new EV spark plug in the engine, and I've got like 2 boxes of these, and we've never run them before, so I figured, you know what the heck, let's throw it in and see what it does. When we shook the engine down, and the whole package, so we ran 4 or 5 laps, and came in, easy laps, just making sure everything shifted, and then we come in and stop, had Bob and Chuck help me look it over, make sure no water was leaking, no oil was leaking, nothing was rubbing, grinding, stuff like that. Before we went out, the second time was going to be the only other run we were going to do. We weren't there to test all day long. We were there to just evaluate the track, do the video for safety evaluation for the insurance. And so we were only going to really get a quick shakedown, check it out, and then one run. So I changed the plug. Figured if we're going to do one run, I asked Fred, do you mind if I take like 20 minutes? And he said no. No, by all means, go ahead and take your 20 minutes, but he wants to get back home to cut his lawn and stuff. He's had a tough few days of work, and had a bunch of yard work to do back at the house. We didn't want to hold him up, He wanted to be out of there by 3. I think at the time we took off, it was about 2 o'clock. So you watch the video here. This is actually the one that's uploading now. Take off, and it seems to run okay. I mean, from the video, you really can't see a big difference between when it ran good later on, the last 2 or 3 laps, and these probably, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 laps that we run with this bunk spark plug. But I knew right away, I could feel the difference in the pull of the motor. You might even compare the how quickly the rev lights come up to the later video. Speed was better later on than it was here, although it starts out okay while things were cool. I think what happens is when the engine gets hot, there was some kind of production issue with the spark plug. Down inside here, where this metal meets the nose or the insulator, the porcelain, down in there is actually a readable area of the spark plug. Darcy DeCoste sent me a letter a bunch of years ago when I was doing RS Honda stuff about reading spark plugs and tuning and air density and when it changes, how it changes, just regular everyday stuff. In the morning, generally, you're going to want to be richer. In the afternoon, you're going to want to be leaner. just temperature of the day, colder weather, fatter, hotter weather, leaner, stuff like that. Just basic stuff. But he told me about reading the bottom of this piece of porcelain. And he says there should be a band there where the porcelain meets the metal on the porcelain that tells you about your main jet setting. It should be 0.5 millimeter, anywhere up to 3 millimeters in width. And you should be able, with, optics, being able to look in there and see it and read it. And that tells you about your main jet tuning. Now, I'm not going to get into all the ins and outs of what he was talking about, but he also talks about the insulator being glazed or shiny, being an indication of being too lean, peppered with black spots, being an indication of detonation or pre-detonation, and then of course the glue issue, with the bubbling around the center electrode and also around that metal band area down there. So that's the first time I've ever seen it. When I cut the run short, we pulled in, told Chuck and Bob, man, the exhaust temperature skyrocketed. It was in a way danger zone. Water got hot. The motor felt like it was laying over. I'm thinking, man, if I blow this thing up the first time I run it, and on camera too, I'm never going to live this down. So pulled in, hemmed and hawed for a few minutes. I walked over and I'm like, hey, let's check that plug that I put in, So we pulled it out, and you could see little bubbles that almost looked like metal particles down there, until I took a dental pick and with a wire on the end and got down in there, and they popped, and then you could see more of them bubbling out. Craziest thing that I think I've ever seen. I showed it to Chuck and Bob with a magnifier so they could see it, so no one could say, oh, you're nuts, you don't know what you're talking about. I believe that maybe air was leaking, up through there, and that caused air leak caused the temperature to go up. Not so large of an air leak that it would blow it up right away, but obviously enough to change the tuner and the motor. When I pulled in after 10 minutes of what was going to be a 20-minute run, I was going to give up. We were just going to load it up and go. Fred was at that point in the pit lane. He had been up in the office out in the front, and Bob says, man, why don't you try throwing that other plug in, after we looked at it, just to turn it, so I asked Fred, hey, do you mind if I just need 2 or 3 laps? He said, yeah, man, just go make it quick. So we swapped the old plug out back into it, and he actually pushed me off. We took off, and you can see in those last couple laps, the motor was happy again, singing right along. We didn't have tire diameter or gearing right for the track. This gearbox is a little bit different than the old one. First and third gear are the same. Second, fourth, fifth, and sixth are all more Bonneville, taller, I guess you'd say. So obviously I could feel the difference. We've been to Nelson with Grattan gearing like we were on yesterday, and it worked with other motors and other setups. So probably could have tweaked it just a little bit with tire diameter. Maybe not adding another tooth, but squeaking a little shorter set of tires, maybe a little wider wheel, make the tire a little shorter and smaller around would have got us in a happy spot with the revs and gear selection. A lot of messing around with that. And Fred told me right from the get-go, listen, there's no EMTs here, so you're not to go 10/10ths. He said, don't go hog wild. So, and I kind of probably went a little overboard, and he let us off. So that's the technical bit with the spark plugs, what went on. We think we got that straightened out. Like I said, anybody that knows anything about that or has experienced anything like that, leave a comment below and let us know what your experience was with that. I also want you to take a quick look at this here. I'm working on something else. You take a look at the screen. Something else we play with a little bit is jetting. We have a Delortto carburetor configuration setup software. It's from F1 karts, Formula 1 karts in the UK. I got the specific setup from Dennis Bernier. He's the one that helped me get it up and running. But you pick different setups, as you can see here. You give 1 carb, 2, 3, 4 different settings. You pick the venturi of the carburetor. You see I'm on 30 because I'm on a 30 millimeter carb. Throttle position is clip position of the needle. You pick the main jet size, tube diameter, and then you pick the needle from this list here. There are hundreds of needles here. Okay, I mean, I don't know if we can scroll through this thing. Yeah, you see it go. I mean, there's from there's U numbered needles, K and K, all the K needles, K segmented needles, from the K01 all the way to K98, I think is the last one. Just a bunch of different stuff, and all the two needle dimensions are here. They're spelled out for you. There's I think there's 7, but there's only 4 of them we really pay attention to. 3 of them. The diameter of section A, which is here, the big fat part of the red bit. Diameter of B, which is, come on, Robert, put your glasses on. A, D, C, there's, oh, B at the tip. The diameter of C, or it's not the diameter, it's the length from the tip to the end of the taper. So that designates the difference between the needles. So what you do is you put all this information in, and then you hit calculate down here, where I got to go to the graph. I've already calculated. There are 2 different setups in here. It gives you a graph. The first setup on the other screen is the setup that's in the carburetor that came with the engine we were running yesterday. The carburetor that we ran yesterday was from my RVS, the older homologation Vortex, with the setup in it that Tom Barth gave us. All those guys are running. It worked really good for the RVS. It's obviously a little lean, I guess, for the RVXX. You take a look at that here. That one's in the green, setup. And what I've done here is I put in the different needles, because one was the K98 and one was K93, both at 30 millimeter Venturi. One, the red one, is the K98 needle in the second clip position, which is the carburetor in the configuration which we got it with the engine. A 268 tube, and it's not a DQ tube, it's the other one, a DR or whatever it is. But this program, the software program, doesn't designate DQ tube from the other tube. It just gives you that diameter size. So we just go with it. We put in the 268 and 264, which I ran yesterday. Yesterday we ran at Nelson K93, 264 tube, middle clip position, the center of all 5, which is clip position number 3. And what we do for the graph is we put a 220 main jet in the setup. So basically what we're doing is finding out what the jet equivalent is of that tube and needle with no main jet in it at all. So it'll give you the maximum flow of that tube and needle setup. Because believe it or not, in Europe, a lot of guys that are tuners don't use a main jet at all. They only tune with a tube and a needle. A main jet would be a fine tuning item for them. So there you go. Just like a clip position would be fine tuning. So we find out what the maximum flow of each setup would be. Then obviously we'll go back and change. Let's go back over here, and in the second setup we'll put in the main jet that we ran and set up a 220. Yesterday we were on a 130 main jet, which is, I'd run a 140 in 45 degree, 50 degree weather. Yesterday it was well into the 70s, so 130 should have been fat for the weather conditions, okay? Let me straighten that out. So we'll put the 130 in there, and this is the setup that came from Two Wild Karting, the original guys that set the motor up when they ran it for practice at the Super Nationals. They had a 160 main jet with a K98 needle, second clip position, which would be second down from the top, 268 tube. Let's see what how the difference compares to the other graph. You see the flattening out of the curve is basically, this was going to go and run almost a 180 with no main jet in it, right? That's why we put the 220 in. When we put the 160 in, it flattens out at 160. This is throttle position, 0%, 100%. This is jet equivalent from a 250 down to a 50. You're never going to run a 50 main jet, obviously, but with the 30 millimeter carburetor, we do have main jets that are sized anywhere from 115 main jet to a 145. Or in this case, now I have a 160. So you can compare side by side what we ran yesterday at Nelson, from 0% throttle to about 16% throttle. It's running at an 85 main jet. The curve goes up as the throttle comes open to almost halfway. 50% is here. Let me put the cursor on here. Right here is about 40. Where are we at? 46%. It's a jet equivalent of a 130. That's where the 130 main jet that was in it takes over. At less than half throttle to wide open throttle, it's running at 130. So that might explain why we were seeing exhaust temps a little higher than we were used to with the other engine. We've run this same setup on that engine, but for some reason, intake flow, the stiffer reeds, all those things, stiffer reeds require fatter main jetting. Looking at the carburetor that came with the engine and its graph, much fatter at less percentage of throttle opening. It doesn't get to its main jet equivalent, stops the rise of the curve. Yeah, it's about almost 82% throttle, and from there to 100% throttle, it's just running on 160. But as you can see, compared to the 130, it's going to be fatter. It's going to, from half throttle to 3/4 throttle, which is here and say here, it's still a lot more fuel than I was getting. And then from wide open, obviously more fuel with the 160. So, bummed me out. If we'd have had more time, obviously yesterday wasn't a test for Robert Day. It was just, what it was. Go turn some laps, get some film, and get the ball rolling with the track and with the insurance company, and at the same time get a shakedown of this new motor before we got to go laying on its ear in anger. So these are the things we play around with here at the big corporate headquarters of RBM Motorsports, right? Just little things. This is nothing. I'm sure there's thousands of guys that play with the Delortto carbs that probably use this kind of stuff. If you're not, you need to check it out. www.f1carts.co.uk and see if you can find the app or software program from them and use it. It's phenomenal. It's fantastic. I've got a K28 needle, a K98 needle, a K93 needle, and I've got everything from a 264, 266, 268. I've got all kinds of different tubes, and I can throw all that stuff in here with different clip positions and play with all different kinds of stuff, and it gives you all different kinds of graphs and different throttle positions. So it's all stuff to do. It gets cold here in the winter. We get a bunch of snow. You can't go play with go-karts, so this is what you do. You do your homework and you try to figure it out. That's it. That's all we got for you today. It's probably more than enough. Like I said, anybody that had any kind of issue with this particular plug or any manufacturer plug and seen any bubbling like that, crazy. It didn't leave any residue around. It almost looked like, bubbles that kids blow. It had that oil on water kind of purple sheen to it, you know what I mean? Crazy looking. It wasn't gas though. The plug is it is shiny. It has got that glaze on it like Darcy mentioned. So I think we just had this thing too lean, and I think we got off easy yesterday, to tell you the truth. These, from what my experiences, the two ICCs I've had run now, they do not like to be leaned out like the old Honda did. They like a lot of fuel. For some reason, the fatter the better. They make more power when they've got a lot of fuel. And obviously, they won't saw themselves in half if they've got a bunch of fuel running through them too. So that's it. We're going to stay on course. We're trying to get people interested in Nelson, not just to do track days with me, but we stayed and talked to Fred, and that video is coming up as well. We'll have a whole Nelson Legends 2017 little section of videos. There'll probably be 5 videos in there where we talk to Fred when we're leaving, and he gives us Buddy Rice's phone number at WKA and wants us to call them because WK's been in contact with Fred about doing a regional or a national. Also mentioned the Woodbridge Kart Club not contacting him, but maybe being the club that Buddy mentioned in his contacts with Fred about doing something out there next year. So why not lay down all of our poo-poo and do the right thing for our struggling sport and get together out there, no matter who we represent, what club, what organization, or what track day group or whatever, you know, and come together and get out there and support this track and these people. You know, they did a heck of a lot of work out there, and they're going to keep continuing to do the work. But the track is done, and that's the most important thing to the guys with the go-kart. It's a smooth track, and you can see from the video, there's some bumps, and you're going to get bumps, you know, especially in a kart. But for the most part, like I said, it's an 8.5. Once they get the curbs in, and you can see where you need to turn in, get off the gas, get onto the brakes. The reference wasn't there that I was used to from the old track head curbing and stuff. So once they get that done, you know, and they get new bathrooms and showers, it'll be a 10. But until then, just 9. But we need to get out there, folks. We need to get out there, and I'll be posting stuff. Keep your eye on e-karting news. I'll post stuff up by talking to Fred. The track is going to run it. Robert's not going to make any money. Robert's not going to charge any money. The track's going to handle it. They're going to decide what they're going to charge you and bring us in and give us a day. They want just karts. They want to have a day just for karts, and they'd like to do it this fall. So that's a mouthful. Enjoy yourselves. Tomorrow's Sunday. I'm going to church. I hope you all are heading there as well. We're praying for you, Mike Vannoy. I don't know you, but we're thinking about you. Bob did a shout out to you there. Anytime somebody gets hurt in a go-kart, it hurts. It hurts all of us. We feel it because we know that this is just a hobby. And although we may be serious and some of us super ultra competitive and everything, when one of us gets knocked down, it's like somebody just took the air out of you. And because it could happen to any one of us at any time. Life is short, folks. Get straight with Christ. Go to church. I love y'all. We'll see you at the races.